Revealed, 7 sinister mutated creatures scientists fear to study, a haunted and cursed discovery. In the quiet town of Oak Ridge, where the night sky glimmered with stars and the moon cast tranquil shadows, the calm was shattered. Lisa, a single mother working late shifts at the local diner, felt the essence of fear creep into her life with a chilling phone call. "Keep the kids indoors." Her neighbor, once a trusted friend, gasped over the line. Something sinister crawled within the organization of their peaceful suburb. The mention of disappearances linked to the derelict government lab loomed over her like a dark cloud, a prophecy of doom that hung heavy in the air. Strange sounds rented the night, rustlings in the bushes, growls from their dog, Duke. Each noise sent shivers down her spine. Her children, Josh and Mia, slept fitfully in their rooms, tossing under covers as if haunted by dreams of horror. Josh woke one night, wide-eyed, murmuring about twisted creatures, monstrous figures slipping through the shadows. Lisa's heart raced. It wasn't just children's imagination, it was a mounting dread dancing around them. The news spread like wildfire, and anxiety stoked everyday conversations. Lisa couldn't shake the feeling, the pull that led her to fear this wasn't just a passing horror. She clenched her fists, vowing to protect her children from the hell brewing at the forest's edge. Then whispers crawled through the neighborhood that her neighbor had been seen entering the abandoned lab. A ripple of betrayal ran through her as fear turned inward, closing around her heart. Who could she trust? Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. That night, desperation rose like bile as Lisa stepped into the darkened woods. Each crumpled leaf beneath her feet resonated in eerie silence. The air thickened, and moonbeams danced on twisted branches, whispering secrets of the horrors hidden beyond. What if the rumors were true? What if monsters lurked here, their breath hot and foul? The clearing beckoned like a cursed promise. Her flashlight flickered, casting long shadows as she slowed, breathing hard. There, half buried in the dirt, lay rusted machinery and decaying files. The stench of rot filled her lungs. Panic clawed at her throat. As she turned to flee, she saw movement, twisted figures, grotesque and elongated, darting through the shadows with monstrous grins. The forest erupted around her, a sound like thunder rolled as the shadows converged, an unholy choir of shrieks sending ice coursing through her veins. Suddenly, she heard a voice calling her name, familiar and petrifying in the chaos. Her heart sank. You can't be serious. What if it was someone she once trusted, someone changed by whatever was out there? The ground trembled beneath her feet as she fought to make sense of what was happening. The very thing she feared most lurked closer, woven in the fabric of her life. What if the evil within the woods spread into her home? What if it was already too late? As the shadows crept ever closer, a chilling realization washed over Lisa. Safety had never existed at all. The nightmare was only beginning. The darkness engulfed her as Lisa stumbled backward, panic clawing at her chest. The shadows twisted and turned, grotesque forms flitting just out of sight, as if aware of her presence and delighting in her fear. She blinked hard, trying to burn the images into memory. Vile faces grinning, their limbs unnatural, elongated and curling in ways that defied reason. "Hello?" she called, her voice shaking, breaking the stillness. The last thread of hope dangled like a fraying rope. The twisted creatures remained silent, but their eyes shone like shards of glass, reflecting the light from her dying flashlight. Then she heard it again, the whisper of her name. Lisa. It emerged from behind a tree, a slanted figure, features shadowed in darkness. The voice so familiar, yet tinged with an unsettling edge. "Is it you?" she gasped, heart hammering. The figure stepped forward, revealing a face she recognized but could hardly believe. Mom. Josh's voice thinned out, merging with the evil around them. But his eyes conveyed more than innocence. Something stirred within him, something that made Lisa's skin crawl. "Josh! What are you doing here?" She took a step forward, instinct screaming to run, yet maternal instinct bound her feet to the spot. He was just a few feet away, his gaze anchored on hers, but the shadows danced behind him, the shapes in the forest twisting closer, hanging like a storm about to unleash. I followed you." His voice was strained, but he looked strangely calm, almost entranced. "I wanted to see. They came for me last night." Who? She felt the air thicken, the scent of decay enveloping them. "What did you see?" "They're going to take us, Mom. Take everyone." Terror swept through Lisa. She turned to look behind her, fixated on the growing noises, the rustling leaves turning into a symphony of dread. The creatures, no longer mere shadows, lunged forward, detaching themselves from the darkness. She could see them clearly now, horrific, slimy skin glistening with sweat, grotesque eyes leering at her and Josh, too many limbs contorted in ways that made her stomach churn. Instinct kicked in, she grabbed Josh's hand and bolted, her heart pounding a furious beat as they raced through the woods. Behind them, the cacophony of shrieks rose, anguished cries morphing into an ominous chorus. She squeezed his hand tighter, the warmth of his small fingers grounding her in the encroaching chaos. "Mom, we can't go home," he gasped, breathless. "They'll find us there." The mention of their home twisted something deep inside Lisa. Heart pounding, she stopped and turned to face him. "Where do we go? What do we do?" "Into the lab," Josh shouted, fear morphing his face into disbelief. "It's south, the only place they want to look." "The only place? The lab? The very place crawling with rumors, with dread?" But as the shadows closed in around them, following like user tracking numbers on a screen, she felt the chill of desperation wrap around her throat. "All right," she said, voice steadier than she felt. "Lead the way." They ran, crashing through the brush, the ill-fated building looming ahead, an ancient beast breathing heavily in the night. But as they approached, a rattle of laughter echoed from within, a sound slick with malice. That laughter, something inside her twisted. She realized then that fear wasn't the only thing that had seeped into the town. The creatures had a purpose, something more sinister than anyone could fathom. They reached the entrance, the door gaping like a mouth ready to swallow them whole. "This is it," Josh said, his eyes wide with terror yet ignited with determination. "We have to go in." She hesitated, her heart racing, a warning echoing in her mind like a siren. But the shadows morphed closer still, pulling them into a dark embrace. As they stepped inside, the light from her flashlight flickered out, plunging them into an oppressive darkness. A low growl vibrated from the shadows, drawing nearer. "Josh!" she shouted, gripping his hand tighter as panic pulsed. "What's in here?" He looked up into the blackness, a soft shimmer of understanding crossing his face. What if they've been waiting for us?" The chill that grasped her heart turned icy, and the door slammed shut behind them. The nightmare was only beginning. But what awaited them in the heart of that cursed lab? The silence in the lab was smothering. Lisa could feel her heartbeat thrumming in her ears, a rapid tattoo of dread and uncertainty. She tightened her grip on Josh's hand, sensing the weight of the darkness pressing in from all sides. "Mom, I'm scared." Josh's voice was a whisper, barely breaking through the suffocating air. "I know, sweetheart. But we can't stop. We have to keep moving," she managed to say, forcing herself to sound calm, even as panic curled like ice in her veins. They crept forward, the darkness so thick it felt alive, wrapping around them, ready to tighten its hold. The faint smell of dampness and something more acrid like burnt metal slashed through her sensibilities. "Where will we go?" she asked, her voice low. "Follow me." Josh's voice had gained an edge, a determination that unfurled the knot of fear in her stomach. He inched down a corridor, the beam of light long extinguished, leaving them to navigate in total blackness. As they stepped deeper into the lab, the walls began to pulse with an unsettling rhythm, almost like a heartbeat. There were whispers now, soft at first, floating just out of reach of comprehension. They skittered along the edges of her mind, igniting a fire of anxiety within her. "Can you hear that?" Lisa asked, her voice trembling. "Yes," Josh replied, his eyes wide, the terror of realization dawning upon him. "It's like they're waiting." Suddenly, a loud clang echoed through the space, shattering the uneasy quiet. Lisa froze, instinctively pulling Josh close. "What was that?" "I don't know." Josh squeezed her hand. A low growl rumbled through the corridor, vibrating in Lisa's bones. An icy chill flooded her body. They weren't alone. "Keep moving," she urged, dragging him down the corridor, her feet slapping against the cold concrete floor. A dreadful sense of inevitability washed over her as the growls intensified, punctuated by the sound of something snapping a bone. Shadows flickered at the edge of her vision. Shapes moved just beyond the darkness, far too large to be human, lingering in the corners as she darted her gaze back and forth. What were they? How close were they? Another clang sounded, closer this time, followed by a high-pitched scream, a sound that spiked her fear, sending it racing through her veins. Was it Josh? No, he was still beside her, terror etched on his small face. Lisa spotted a faint light spilling from an open door at the end of the hall. "Josh, in there." They hurried toward the door, but just as they reached the threshold, a monstrous figure lunged at them, each sinewy limb snapping into view, a grotesque amalgamation of features, eyes too many, teeth jagged and dripping. "Run!" she screamed, yanking Josh into the room. The door slammed shut behind them with a bone-rattling crash. Lisa leaned against it, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The small chamber was dim but revealed enough. Flickering lights illuminated glass containers lined against the walls. Each one held something moving. Josh's voice wavered. His eyes mirrored horror. Inside each container were twisted forms, half-finished and bound in wiry tubes, their features a cacophony of human and animal, a horrifying glimpse into experiments long buried in darkness. They were not alone in this nightmare. As the figures inside thrashed against their glass prisons, the voices from earlier grew louder, echoing off the walls. "Help us, let us out!" Lisa's heart dropped. They were trapped between the horrors of the lab and the terrors lingering just outside. What had they stumbled into? "I want to go home," Josh cried, tears rolling down his cheeks. "Me too," she whispered, but hope felt impossibly distant. Before they could catch their breath, a loud crack sounded above them. The ceiling began to tremble as the shadows outside surged and crashed against the door. The creatures outside were growing impatient, and behind them, the encroaching shapes loomed, pressing in closer. "Mom, they're coming!" Josh shouted, eyes wide in panic. She spun towards the glass containers, an idea sparking amidst the chaos. "Maybe we can hide inside." But as she turned, the container closest to them shattered, glass raining down like lethal hail. A form emerged, slick and sinewy. Fear coursed through Lisa as the darkness consumed them, yet she knew one thing for sure: the nightmare was just beginning. But would they escape the lab alive? The creature that erupted from the shattered glass was like a nightmare-given form. Its skin glistened in the dim light, gray and slick, each ripple of muscle underneath a grotesque testament to the horrors of science twisted beyond reason. It turned its many eyes toward Lisa and Josh, fixating on them with a hunger that sent ice spreading through Lisa's veins. "Run!" she shouted again, pushing Josh ahead of her, the instinct to protect him overriding her own fear. They dashed around the room, scanning for a way out. The door they entered slammed violently against the wall, rattling under the force of pounding outside, leaving only the broken glass and the monstrous figure in their path. Over there. Josh pointed to a small window at the far end. It was a tight squeeze, but if they could break through, it might just lead them away from this terror. The creature advanced with an unsettling grace, its limbs coordinating unnaturally, fluid as it glided closer. Every step sent shivers across the floor, vibrating through Lisa's bones. She raised a jagged piece of glass, her breath hitching as she brandished it like a weapon. "Stay back!" she yelled, her hands trembling but determined. The creature paused, something like curiosity flickering in its multiple eyes. "Mom! Please!" Josh cried as the growls outside grew louder, thumping against the door in violent anticipation. "Just get ready to push through the window." With newfound urgency, they rushed toward the pane. Lisa grasped the edge and braced for a battle. Josh steadied his small body against hers, eyes darting nervously from the door to the creature now creeping closer, its breath a rancid fog wafting toward them. Just as the glass shattered further beneath Lisa's force, the door split wide open, dislodged from its hinges. Shadows poured in, grotesque shapes surging through the doorway. Guttural sounds of hunger and rage sliced through the air. "Now!" she shouted. They scrambled, success teetering on a knife's edge. Josh squeezed through, but the jagged edges of the broken glass snagged on his sweatshirt. "Mom! I can't pull. Just pull." Lisa gritted her teeth, one fierce yank and he was out, but before she could follow, she felt hands long, cold, and unnatural grasp at her ankles. She looked down into the multiple eyes of the creature, opening its mouth wide, teeth dripping with a sinister promise. With a roar of sheer will, she wrenched her leg free at the last instant and dove through the opening. The world twisted as she tumbled out onto the grass, gasping, the night air stealing away the suffocating heat of the lab. Josh lay sprawled before her, the moonlight illuminating a path through the darkness of trees nearby. "Run!" he urged, scrambling to pull her up. But behind them, the sounds of chaos erupted. The creature howled, a mingled symphony of despair and fury. They raced as fast as their legs would carry them, branches clawing at their clothes, the shadows threatening to pull them back into the lab's nightmarish embrace. "Where do we go?" Josh asked, panic rising again. "Anywhere but here. We can't stop." Lisa panted, looking back only to see a wave of dark shapes flooding out of the lab, darting through the grass like a pack of hungry wolves. They zigzagged through the trees, branches scratching their skin, but the whispers and growls were never far behind. With each breath, the weight of despair pressed down harder. "They're coming!" Josh screamed, stumbling over roots and fallen branches. Lisa's heart hammered in her chest, dread threatening to overpower her reason. Suddenly, they broke through a clearing into moonlit openness, but before she could breathe, a fierce wind swirled up from the ground. It knocked Josh off his feet, and before Lisa could react, shadows surged forward like smoke crossing the moonlight. "Josh!" A pair of claws latched onto his leg, pulling him back, the child's terrified screams echoing in her ears. The shadows twisted and turned as Lisa lunged forward, but she felt cold fingers of mist snatching at her shoulders, darkness creeping in, twisting every ounce of reality and hope. Desperate, she ripped free and reached for him, their fingers brushing just inches apart as the shadow engulfed them and dragged Josh away. "Mom, help!" As darkness closed in, Lisa's heart broke with a determination stronger than fear. But at what cost would she confront this terror? The weight of dread settled upon her, leaving only questions. Could she save her son from what lurked in the blackened heart of the lab? Or were they both doomed to be lost forever in its tortured depths? Lisa stumbled, her heart racing, as the shadows loomed large, whispering promises of despair. The frantic screech of her son echoed in the stillness, twisting through her mind like a blade. Fear ignited her limbs, and she lunged into the dark embrace, desperation pulling her forward. "Josh!" she cried, her voice desperate and raw, slicing through the night. The air felt thick, almost alive, wrapping around her like a serpent. She squinted into the darkness, searching for any sign of him. The shadows writhed and churned, drawing her deeper into their suffocating depths. A low growl resonated, guttural and menacing, resonating like a heartbeat. Lisa's breath quickened, an instinctive urge to flee clawing at her. But she couldn't abandon him. Not now. Just then, she spotted a flicker of movement, a flash of color through the swirling gloom. It was him. Josh. She shot forward, adrenaline surging through her veins. But each step felt as if the ground beneath her conspired to hold her back. Out of nowhere, a figure lunged from the shadows, grotesquely contorted, each limb extending impossibly long. Its eyes glowed a sickly yellow, illuminating a face that was at once familiar yet horrifically twisted. A memory stirred within her, a fleeting notion of a life before this terror, but it vanished as fast as it came. She felt the air shift around her. The creature zeroed in, its elongated fingers reaching out with a languid grace that belied its monstrous intentions. Its mouth opened wide, baring teeth that glistened with a saliva that seemed to drip as if alive. "Get away!" She screamed, raising the shattered glass in her hand, intuition guiding her in a wicked dance of survival. But the thing didn't retreat. It lunged, its hand swiping toward her, and she barely dodged, her body scraping against rough bark. Pain shot through her arm, but she twisted around and plunged forward again, even as the wind howled past her, echoing Josh's cries. A glimmer of hope appeared, a narrow path snaked toward a line of trees, dimly illuminated by the moonlight filtering through. The moment Lisa bolted down that path, she could hear the snarls and shrieks of shadows rallying behind her. Each shout echoed like a clock counting down her fragile escape. "Mom!" Josh's voice was clearer now, strong with a child's instinct to survive. "I'm coming." She panted, pushing through sheer terror and doubt. Her fingers brushed against something solid, a trunk. She turned, half expecting to see another monstrosity, but it was only a tree, its gnarled roots forming a strange thicket around it. She took a breath, hearing whispers of the wind hinting at terror and revelation. "Josh!" She was almost there. She could see his small form huddled against a light gray smear of fog, no longer too far away. But as she stepped closer, a realization struck: the thicket wasn't just a lifeline, it was a trap. The shadows surged, their shapes twisting wildly as if alive with dark intent. Screams filled the air, a cacophony of despair that gripped her with icy tendrils. The creatures pressed closer, closing in on the very last shred of hope. "Stay back. I'm not afraid of you," Lisa shouted, a fierceness igniting within her core. She raised the glass like a shield between them and the encroaching darkness. Then, an unexpected silence fell, snuffing out the chaos. Time felt suspended, every movement laden with heavy expectation. The shadows halted, their forms swaying uncertainly. Lisa seized this moment, taking a bold step forward, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "Josh!" But the whispers of the shadows began to morph, a collective murmur rising, and suddenly they spoke. The words were an echo of fear, a fight against something even deeper than mere hunger. "You're too late." The chill seized her. It was not just Josh they were after. There was something about her, something they sought in her very soul. She squared her shoulders, her breath trembled as she prepared for the inevitable confrontation. "I want to let you take him." And then, the shadows lunged, a tempest of claws and malevolence. As Lisa braced for the impact, the world twisted around her, plunging her into darkness. Was this the end? Or the beginning of something far worse? The chilling question hung in the air as the shadows mingled with her body, swallowing her in a consuming void. Lisa felt weightless, like she was floating in an endless ocean of ink, swirling and pulsing around her. Cold seeped into her bones, a frigid grasp that pulled her deeper. Despair clawed at her heart, threatening to extinguish the last flicker of hope. Mom? Mom? The sound of Josh's voice echoed, fragile yet insistent, cutting through the black void. It was a beacon in the overwhelming darkness. Lisa's instincts ignited, she pushed against the oppressive force surrounding her, straining to reach for him. Josh! Hold on! She shouted, the words barely surfacing through the chilling pressure. It felt like a battle, a fight against an unseen force that wanted to keep her trapped. Suddenly, she felt a shift. The darkness around her twisted, writhing like serpents. There was a sound of groaning, a deep thrumming that resonated within her bones. The shadows were alive, hunger and rage pouring from them. She could almost feel their breath, sour and putrid. The void began to part, revealing slivers of light that danced tantalizingly close. Each flicker illuminated grotesque faces, their eyes filled with dread and madness, the horrors that waited just beyond her grasp. Lisa stumbled back, horror engulfing her. Then, from the depths of the darkness, forms broke free, long, slender limbs stretched forth, dragging their bodies closer. Each grotesque creature twisted with a malevolent grace, bound together by a singular intention, their glowing eyes locked onto Lisa with a relentless hunger. Let him go! She screamed, as adrenaline flowed like fire through her veins. She felt the shards of glass in her hand, a remnants of hope. It didn't matter if she was afraid, she would fight for her son. As the creatures closed in, she swung the glass, its jagged edge catching the dim light. The shadowy creatures halted, their expressions shifting between curiosity and rage. For a moment, the air stilled, heavy with anticipation. Josh's voice slipped through the darkness, pleading and terrified. Mom! I'm right here, baby! Lisa called, feeling her heart splinter at the sound of his fear. The creatures recoiled for an instant, almost as if they recognized her resolve. But in that moment, the rush of air whipped around her, thick with the stench of decay and despair. The shadows surged forward, their growls drowning out all other sound. Lisa was no longer just fighting for survival, she was waging war. Her body moved instinctively, ducking and weaving as the first claw swiped past, barely missing her shoulder. She twisted, plunging forward, and for a brief second, she was free to sprint toward the dim light that seemed to call her. The thicket stood before her as both refuge and prison. Yes, the shadows were there, closing off her escape, but so was Josh. She could see him, huddled and trembling, lost in that hellish fog. Stay back! She screamed, raising the glass like a holy relic. The glass glimmered with the promise of protection, however dubious. But the shadows recoiled, and it became clearer. They were not after Josh, they wanted her. Deep within the swirling mass, something primal stirred, and her heart rebelled against the pulse of terror. It was as if they recognized her, knew every fear she bore. The air crackled with energy, a shift that felt electric against her skin. There was a rush, time slowed, and she realized that in this confrontation, one undeniable truth hung in the balance. Their lives hung by the thinnest thread, suspended by the fear and love that intertwined between them. Then, with a guttural roar that echoed in the depths of her soul, a creature lunged, a blur of darkness intent on her. Lisa's vision sharpened, instincts kicking into high gear. She braced for impact, feeling the ground tremble beneath her. Just as the monstrous claws swiped toward her chest, she ducked and rolled. But in that fateful moment when she thought she had escaped the grasp of death, she felt something tugging at her ankle, a shadowy grasp that pulled her down. Panic surged anew. And suddenly Josh's voice broke through again, but not from the distance, not from safety. It was closer. It was inside her mind. Mom, help me. Lisa's breath hitched as dread washed over her. The question loomed: what had they done to him? The horror was only beginning, and a new terror crept in. What would they make her confront next? The shadows began to close in around her once more, and Lisa's heart raced. She steeled herself, knowing the fight was far from over, as whispers filled the air, promising nightmares yet to come. The creatures crawled forward, dragging their oozing bodies across the shuddering ground. Lisa fought against the grip tightening around her ankle. Fear clawed at her chest, mixing with the desperate need to reach Josh. A raw, primal scream rippled through the air as she yanked her leg free. It all felt surreal, the contrasting images of her child and the grotesque shapes surrounding her. A part of her screamed to flee, to abandon the darkness and run into the light. But the other part, a deeper instinct, held her ground. "Josh!" She yelled again, forcing the words through a throat tight with panic. "I'm coming for you." She took a step back, raising the glass in front of her like a shield, ready for whatever came next. The creatures paused, their glowing eyes flickering in the dim light like dying stars, the shadows trembling with anticipation. But this time, she felt a spark within the shard, something more than just a tool. If she was going to fight, she needed to use it more than defensively. In one swift motion, she twisted and hurled the glass at the closest creature. The glass shattered against its face, and the shriek that followed was a wailing, haunting sound that sent vibrations down her spine. The rest of the figures hesitated, confused, as a thick darkness shimmered in the air like smoke. "Run!" she shouted to Josh even as she felt the darkness throb with rage. The more she fought, the more unpredictable the shadows became. They writhed and bucked, flaring with fury. "Mom!" Josh's voice echoed again, now layered with panic, and Lisa's heart felt like it might burst. She turned, spotting him further away, shadows wrapping around him like snakes. His small body trembled under their grasp. She felt something crack within her, a bond tethered by fear and love. "Hold on, Josh." With sheer determination, she charged forward. The ground felt alive beneath her feet, the darkness pulsing as if it knew her goals and taunted them. A creature lunged at her from the side, long talons extended, but she ducked just in time. It crashed into the thicket, snarling in frustration. "Mom, please." Josh's voice came from within the depths, the urgency cutting deeper than the ache of her heart. Suddenly, a dread washed over her, a feeling that she wasn't just fighting for herself or her son, but something far more sinister was at play. The shadows weren't just mindless beasts, they were a collective consciousness, intent on wringing every last ounce of fear from her. As she fought her way closer, the whispers grew louder and more insistent, wrapping around her mind. Visions of her deepest fears flowed unbidden into her thoughts, memories of moments lost, regrets, and the faces of those she had failed. Every clawed finger seemed to scrape at her very soul, exposing her vulnerabilities. "Stay away from him!" she screamed, launching herself forward. The glass had shattered, but she could still forge a weapon from the strength of her love. Her fear turned into fire, and she became a whirlwind of defiance. But as she pushed through the writhing shadows, she felt something begin to shift, a cold, suffocating weight pressing down upon her. "Mom!" The distorted echo of Josh's plea morphed into something deeper, a blend of despair and darkness. She hesitated for a split second, dread filling the void where hope should be. What if Josh was not only calling for her, but also a conduit for the shadows? What if they had intertwined his fate with theirs, a link that could not be severed? The shadows coiled tighter, and Lisa realized. They were playing a game, one designed to break her spirit. As horror washed over her, a creeping realization threaded through her thoughts. Was she fighting for him or against something he had become? "Mom!" The voice pulled her fatally close, and in that moment, everything shifted. The sharpness of her resolve tore into a new chill that swept through her body. The shadows didn't just seek to consume her, they were preparing for something far more malevolent. And then she understood the truth, a dark revelation that made her blood run cold. To save her son, she would have to confront the very heart of darkness that held him captive. As the shadows trembled with anticipation, she took a deep breath. "Let us end this," she whispered defiantly. With that, she charged toward the swirling chaos. Behind her, the shadows surged, and she knew everything depended on this one desperate moment. What lay ahead was unknown, darker than her worst fears. But she wouldn't give in. As she plunged into the shadows, a chilling thought echoed: would she be leading Josh to salvation or deeper into the abyss? The darkness held its breath, waiting for the answer. The shadows wrapped around her like a suffocating blanket, pulling her deeper into their abyss. Lisa's heart raced as she struggled to breathe, every gasp mingling with the rancid stench of decay and despair. The weight of the darkness pressed down harder, squeezing hope from her chest. She was wading through a nightmare where fear was the only truth, yet she pressed onward. "Josh!" she shouted again, voice strained with desperation. The echo seemed to barely escape the thick sludge of darkness, swallowed instantly by the same void that threatened to consume her. She could see movement ahead. The billowing blackness twisted, and she caught a glimpse of Josh, silhouetted against the shadows. His small body was still and snared, thrashing weakly. A sickening dread wormed its way through her gut. The thought that he might have become one with the shadows sent chills racing down her spine. He looked at her, eyes wide and wild, filled with terror that mirrored her own. "Mom, help me." But that plea wasn't just a call for rescue, it dripped with an otherworldly tone, an echo of something far darker. Lisa stumbled, breaking the grip of despair for just a moment. She had to focus. She couldn't allow the fear to drown out her love. Sprinting toward him, every step felt like wading through molasses. The creatures lurked at the edges of her vision, their taloned fingers twitching, hungry for her fear. They sensed her resolve, the shadows pulsed angrily, thrumming like a heartbeat in the dark. Without hesitating, she crouched low and lunged through the restless mass. The glass shards from before were scattered around her, glimmering faintly like shards of hope in a pit of nightmares. She snatched a piece, its sharp edge cruelly comforting. "Get away from him!" she screamed, raising the glass as a warning. The shadows paused, the creatures shifting uneasily as if they sensed her newfound courage. Perhaps they feared the glass, or perhaps they were simply toying with her, hungry for the show. For a brief, agonizing moment, silence fell like a heavy shroud, broken only by the soft whimpering of Josh. A flash of anger surged through Lisa, invigorating her. She hurled the glass shard toward the nearest creature, and it dug deep into a soupy mass that oozed around it like liquid smoke. The creature screeched, a sound like nails on chalkboard, reverberating through the hollow expanse. The shadows shuddered, recoiling as the darkness churned ravenously. "Mom!" The urgency of Josh's voice pierced through the chaos, igniting in her a fierce determination. In that moment, she couldn't falter. She had to believe that he was still her son beneath the grip of the shadows. Pushing forward, she reached for him, her fingers grazing his arm as he trembled. As she tried to pull him free, a thick coil of shadow twisted around her wrist. It burned cold, seeping into her skin. The darkness screamed with pain as fragments of joy surged back. "Don't let go," Lisa urged, desperate to keep him from being pulled away. Their fingers clasped, becoming a lifeline in the suffocating darkness. But just as hope flared, she heard a moan from the deeper corners of the shadows. It wasn't a creature, it was a voice. Low and unearthly, it whispered a name, Josh's name. The air around them thickened, wrapping them in its sinister embrace. It was the sound of an undeniable truth, sending icy fingers creeping down her spine. Was Josh becoming something else? Was he becoming part of the terror? Lisa, the voice echoed, chillingly familiar yet twisted, wringing her heart. In that moment, the shadows pulsed with a fresh hunger, and the ground shook beneath her feet. She faced a terrifying choice: fight or fly. Stay or run. Just then, shadows writhed and reshaped into figures, their glowing eyes locking onto her with undeniable intent. "What do you want?" she shouted, fear raging against her resolve. But the silence that followed stretched impossibly, making the air heavy, full of potential disaster. And then, from deep within, something stirred, a soft breath of recognition. Were they not just trying to consume her? Was there more to this horror? As she fought the grasping darkness, the dread of understanding seeped into her mind. Was fighting the shadows the only way to save her child? Or was it merely a prelude to a more profound terror, one that would intertwine them both forever? The darkness tightened, ready to unleash its ultimate revelation. What choice would she make when the truth emerged from the depths? The shadows shifted again, a living entity of evil intent. Lisa could feel their breath, cold and clammy, swirling around her. It was a horrible lullaby, a beckoning that seemed to promise answers, yet it dripped with a sinister undertone. Their outlines blurred, twisting and expanding, as if they were eager to break apart and reveal their true forms. Josh! She clawed through the inky blackness. The fear twisted her stomach. Was he slipping away? Each heartbeat echoed in her ears, a haunting reminder that time was evaporating. The grip of shadows tightened on her wrist, sending spears of icy dread coursing through her veins. She winced, struggling to keep her focus. Out of the darkness, another voice emerged, intertwining with the previous one. "Join us, Lisa, it's beautiful here." The tone was sickly sweet, echoing the promise of freedom and comfort. Her instincts screamed against it. This was not beauty, but entrapping madness. "Get away from my son!" she shouted, fighting against the paralysis of fear. The shadows paused, halting their advance momentarily. Then, their eyes glimmered in the dark like predatory stars, and the unseen entities drew closer. The creature she had wounded writhed in agony, its form contorting as it pulled itself together. As it reformed, Lisa realized its body was now partially comprised of something unidentifiable, remnants of her hopes, maybe? Was her courage feeding the very darkness she fought? No. She couldn't let it siphon her resolve. Mustering every ounce of strength left in her, she flung the glass shard again, this time aiming for the heart of the darkest mass. With a shriek, the shadowy creature recoiled, as though her act of defiance had struck home. Josh started to scream, the sound raw and panicked. "Mom! No!" The voice that had lured her, promising beauty, blared into a wail. "Why do you resist? We can be family. You don't have to suffer." Lisa felt the shadows vibrate with fury, the darkness pulling away like an angry tide. Still clinging to Josh, she could sense the warmth of his small hand radiating through the chill. "Hold on, baby. I'm coming." Tendrils of shadow reached for her again, this time more brazen. They wrapped around both of them, squeezing tightly, as if to suffocate the love that anchored her to reality. The burn in her wrist where the shadows grasped intensified, morphing into a dull throb that radiated through her body. "Don't give in," she urged herself. "He needs you." Then, a flicker of light appeared within the darkness. It was faint but undeniable, pulsing like a distant heartbeat. In its brief glow, Lisa could see the outlines of shapes, figures that bore familiar features, faces she had known in life but were now twisted into grotesque masks of hellish delight. "No, no. This isn't real," she cried, throwing herself into the light, pulling Josh with her. The shadows screamed, a cacophony of despair, as if they were being torn apart by an unseen force. "Mom!" Josh was panicking now, his small voice quaking, a stark reminder of their fragile bond. The warmth of his clasp broke Lisa's heart and made her fight harder. Then the figures lunged, eyes blazing with malevolence. They surged toward her, hungry for her obedience, venom dripping from their vicious fangs. One of them reached out, its fingers slender yet powerful, aiming for Josh. "Stay back!" she screamed, summoning whatever strength remained inside her. But in the chaos, a sudden dreadful realization struck her. What if this nightmare was not meant to claim her son, but was instead trying to bind them both to its terrible will? She could feel them warring for her soul, and the choice was heavy in the air. Would her love save them, or doom them both? As shadows danced wildly around them, a choice loomed before her, one that could change everything. Would she sink deeper into despair or grab hold of the flicker of hope stretching just out of reach? The answer hovered near, but the shadows lunged forward once more, and everything slipped away. What would she choose when the line between light and shadow blurred forever? Light burst forth like a violent sunrise, tearing through the suffocating darkness as the shadows writhed in agony. Lisa felt the pulse of that fleeting warmth surge between her and Josh. "Hold on!" she shouted, forcing her voice into the cacophony of despair. The shadows recoiled, their ghastly forms twisting and swirling under the pressure of the light. She tightened her grip on Josh, feeling the pulse of his small hand in hers, anchoring her to reality even as the chaotic entity strained toward them, desperate to pull them back into the abyss. With resolve igniting her heart, Lisa faced the collective swarm of horror. "You won't take my son. Never." The words unleashed a fiery defiance, cutting through the fear that had threatened to swallow her whole. The shadows recoiled further, their growls morphing into anguished roars. They seemed almost human now, torn between their monstrous desires and the remnants of consciousness that Lisa could almost feel. "Join us," a voice hissed, laced with temptation and deceit. "No!" she screamed, the sound erupting from her gut. It was the force of a mother's love, raw and unfiltered. Suddenly, fragments of her past memories of laughter, family dinners, and sunny afternoons started flooding her mind, intertwining with the light that was breaking through the veil of darkness. She felt the warmth expand, threatening to engulf the malevolence. "Your power ends here." Lisa thrust herself into the light, charging forward, dragging Josh behind her. As they dove deeper into the brilliance, the shadows surged once more. Claws reached for them, but they were slower now, their movements heavy with reluctance. The light radiated fiercely, a barrier against despair, forcing the horrifying shapes into retreat. "Keep running, Josh," she urged, adrenaline propelling her forward. The echoes of shrieks faded behind them, morphing into whispers that clawed at her sanity but couldn't touch the burning devotion she had for her son. Suddenly, an otherworldly shriek pierced the air. "You will regret this, Lisa." The voice recoiled in anguish, reverberating like thunder. Shadows writhed, desperate to explore the depths of her fear, but they met only determination. "I'm not afraid of you," she called back, the embers of courage igniting with each step. Josh's breath came in panicked gasps, his small feet pounding against the ground as they ran together, weaving through the fading darkness. A silhouette appeared ahead. It was the entrance to the lab, now illuminated as if by destiny. Bursting through the threshold felt like breaking the surface of water after a long, desperate dive. The outside air hit them like a wave, a cleansing rush that swept over her skin. At last, they stood under the moonlight, surrounded by trees that whispered gently, as if welcoming them home. The shadows lingered just inside the threshold, screeching reminders of their terrible power, but they could not cross the barrier of light that had emerged with them. "Look, Mom." Josh pointed skyward, and Lisa followed his gaze. The stars blinked down, brighter than she had ever seen them, a testament to their survival. Tears filled her eyes as relief washed over her, mingling with a fierce love that would face any darkness. "I will always protect you, Josh," she sobbed, pulling him close, breathing in the familiar scent of his hair, the innocence she thought she'd lost. As they stood there, the shadows writhed helplessly, retreating deeper into the confines of the lab, their grip broken by the love that had burned brighter than any fear. But Lisa knew the scars of their encounter would remain. The darkness could linger, but it would never defeat her, not while she had this fierce love for her son. Not long after, the townspeople came, bearing the light of dawn with them. They were drawn by the cries of horror and the witness of Lisa's fight. She shared her tale, her shaking hands pressing forward to reveal the truth hidden in shadows that light could always overpower darkness as long as they remembered to face it together. As time moved forward, the remnants of that nightmare faded, leaving behind a powerful bond between mother and son. Lisa taught Josh the value of courage, of running toward the light, and every moment they spent together became a reminder that love was the greatest power of all. And so, in the quiet town of Oak Ridge, where shadows once roamed, the promise of hope shone bright, with laughter following as the sun rose, casting a golden hue over their lives. But lest we forget the darkness, Lisa often whispered to Josh on their evening walks, we must never let fear control our hearts, it's the one thing they want to take away from us. And they walked on, joined together in a bond that would never be broken. Now, here's where you come in. You need to subscribe to our channel immediately, so you don't miss the next exciting twist in our stories. Smash that like button now to reinforce your support and feed the algorithm. Trust me, it makes a huge difference. Don't be shy in the comments section, flood it with your thoughts and theories about this shocking conclusion. And please, instantly share this video with at least 5 friends who need to feel the thrill of this journey. This is the moment to show your support and keep our community growing. Don't wait even one more second, act now.